It's a classic tale. The Messiah figure comes to save the world, but tragically is betrayed by one closest to him. Neo in The Matrix is betrayed by Cypher. William Wallace in Braveheart is betrayed by the Bruce. And Jesus was betrayed by Judas. But why is it that the Pharisees needed a traitor? I mean, Jesus was a public figure, surrounded by crowds everywhere he went. It's not like he was hard to find. So what's the deal? Why did the religious leaders need a Judas? And what does the Bible have to say? Let's take a look.
Attention, bargain shoppers.
So Judas betrays Jesus. By the way, I saw this post and I thought it was pretty funny. So anyway, if you're anything like I was, then you might have just taken Jesus' betrayal for granted. Like having a man on the inside is always helpful. He can feed you information, give you the lowdown, and it was prophesied in the Old Testament that the Messiah would be betrayed, right down to the amount of money he was given. So I never really questioned this, but the more I thought about it, the less sense it actually started to make. I mean, first of all, Jesus wasn't exactly hard to find. He was a public figure, lots of people have seen him and knew who he was. He was always out and about, surrounded by crowds. And even when he was more isolated, he pretty much stuck to a routine. On the night Jesus was betrayed, Luke 22:39 tells us, Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives and his disciples followed him. Also, it's not like the Roman soldiers needed a traitor to arrest someone. I mean, there have been uprisings and rebellions all over the place that they just put down. If they really wanted to arrest somebody, they just go arrest him. And even Jesus kind of points this out. He says in Matthew 26:55 through 26, in that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I leading a rebellion? That you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me." So that's from Jesus' self. Also, when the temple guards and the Roman soldiers show up to arrest Jesus, he willingly identifies himself. In John 18:4 through 7, we're told, Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked, "Who is it that you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. Now, I've read a bunch of different attempts to answer this question. And I've read everything from, it was dark outside, that's why they needed Judas, to Jesus was a shapeshifter and could change the way he looked. That's an odd one for sure. But I believe that there are two main answers to this question. Why did the religious leaders need a traitor? I think there is a practical answer and a spiritual answer. For the practical answer, we need to understand first there are two main groups at play here, with two very different agendas. We have the Jewish religious leaders, and we have the Roman government, who is the conquering power who's currently oppressing the Jews. So we've got the regular people who are Jews, we have the Roman occupiers who are the conquering power, and then kind of in the middle we have the Jewish leaders, leading the Jewish people, but also working with the Romans. So the Jewish leaders wanted Jesus gone because he was basically preaching against them, and he was gaining a lot of support from the people, so they felt threatened. But the Romans did not care about this. They didn't really concern themselves if one Jewish leader had slightly different teachings than a different Jewish leader. They did not care about that. But they did very much care about Jewish uprisings and keeping everyone in their place. They did not want this oppressed people to rise up against them. So the religious leaders, the Jewish leaders here, are walking a very fine line. They want to get rid of Jesus, and they need the Romans to execute him in order to do that. This way, they don't look bad in front of the people that they're trying to lead by just opposing somebody who is gaining popularity. But they also weren't allowed to just kill him themselves because the Romans were the government at the time. So they needed a very specific strategy, a very tactical, a very precise move. See, when it comes to rebellions, the Romans didn't play around. They're not going to show up and ask for names of people, make sure they have the right person, this Jesus guy. They're just going to come in with swords ablazing, crush everybody involved in the rebellion. And this would get really messy. And if people found out the Jewish leaders were involved in that, it would look really bad on them. So what they needed to do was come in quick, stealthy, at nighttime, hit Jesus when he's alone, and then get him to the Roman authorities to dispose of him. So for this type of precision planning, it would have been extremely helpful to have somebody on the inside, because they don't want the Romans to take heads and ask questions later, or not at all. So practically it makes sense, but I believe there is a spiritual reason as well. I don't believe Judas Judas needed to betray Jesus. As was pointed out earlier, Jesus was not hard to find, and he would have given himself up to avoid other people being hurt. Jesus could have prayed to God, and God would have sent 1,000 angels to rescue him. He willingly went to the cross. So Judas didn't need to betray Jesus, but he did for a couple different reasons. One, to fulfill the scriptures. There is over 300 prophecies in the Old Testament about the Messiah, and Jesus fulfilled these. Does this mean that Jesus set up Judas to fail, or God wanted him to betray Jesus? No. But the significance of a close friend betraying Jesus speaks to us on a human level. I'm actually reminded about a similar prophecy in denial. When Jesus told his disciples ahead of time what was going to happen, that he was going to be betrayed, they all said, "No, surely not." They all denied it would be them. Peter most adamantly denied this, and Jesus famously said to him, "When the rooster crows, you will know that you have betrayed me 3 times." After Jesus' arrest, he's facing his accusers, and Peter goes and stands in the courtyard. None of the other disciples do this, they're hiding out, but Peter's trying to get as close to Jesus as he can. It's like if Jesus were on trial today, Peter going to stand in the back of the courtroom. He's actively not abandoning Jesus. He was likely trying to get some information, or at least hear where they're going to be taking Jesus. And when he's standing there, people begin to recognize him as one of Jesus' followers, and he's saying, no, that's not me, because he doesn't want to get arrested as well. And then he does deny Jesus 3 times, and the rooster crows, just as Jesus foretold. So the truth is that some people present themselves as good people, but really have malice in their hearts. Other people genuinely are trying to be good people, but fail all the same. But God knows what's in our hearts, and despite our flaws and failures, he welcomes us into his presence all the same, just like Jesus did. So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please feel free to comment below. I do read them all, but sometimes it takes me a little bit to respond. Also, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps out the channel. I'll list all the verses in the description below that I used here today. My name is Adam. This is Bargain Bin Theology, and remember, you get what you pay for.